There are many definitions of sustainability. Here at Semcorp, sustainability is safeguarding the future. To us, that future is bright. We harness the power of the sun and wind, design low-carbon sustainable solutions for green urban cities, and lay the foundation for generations to come. Sustainability is innovation, challenging the norms and leading disruption. We innovate to solve complex global problems. We use our experiences to create opportunities from challenges. Sustainability is about the communities. We care for the communities and aim to improve their quality of life. We forge strong partnerships and leverage our platforms in the region to deliver sustainable solutions. Our success is founded upon the trust from the communities we serve. Sustainability is about our people. Our success is bolstered by the strength and energy of one Semcorp team, a team that can thrive in the current and future world. Sustainability is not just a catchphrase. To us, sustainability is our business.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. I hope all of you are safe and in good health wherever you're tuning in from. My name is Gabriela Inanto. I'm the Associate Officer of Power, Fossil Fuel, Alternative Energy and Storage Department at the ASEAN Center for Energy. I am so excited to be here and to welcome all of you to the ACE Roundtable session at Singapore International Energy Week 2021. This roundtable session is organized by the Energy Market Authority Singapore and the ASEAN Center for Energy and supported by the ASEAN Climate Change and Energy Project. Under the ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Cooperation, or APAIC, Phase 2, 2021 until 2025, ASEAN is stepping up its efforts to accelerate the energy transition and strengthen energy resilience through greater innovation and cooperation. To address the challenges, ASEAN will need to establish innovations to accelerate energy transition. ASEAN needs to take drastic actions and get out of the comfort zone. Yes, we all know that ASEAN has done lots of efforts up to this point. But at the end of the day, we are still left with one question. What is the innovation needed for ASEAN to accelerate its energy transition? Well, you are lucky because today you can find out the answer in this roundtable session. So we will start with some opening remarks from ASEAN Center for Energy, the Royal Norwegian Embassy and Energy Market Authority Singapore. Then we will listen to the presentation by ACE colleagues to set the scene prior to the panel discussion. Then lastly, the center of our roundtable session, we will dive into an in-depth discussion with experts from various backgrounds to explore the innovations and strategies for ASEAN to accelerate its energy transition. To enliven this roundtable session, you can access the live discussion feature where you can chat with other participants and also you can drop your questions at any time. So don't be shy, ask us anything and engage more in this very important discussion. Now it's time to get down to business. To proceed with the agenda, let's all welcome the moderator for this roundtable session, Mr. Benny Suryadi. Mr. Benny is the manager of PFS department at ACE and also the manager of ASEAN Climate Change and Energy Project, or ACCEPT. He has over 10 years of experience managing research and programs related to energy, power, and climate change in Southeast Asia, supporting the countries in accelerating their energy transition. Mr. Benny, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Gabriela. Day 4 of the Singapore International Energy Weeks. So many interesting insight and information that I gained in the last 3 days. I really enjoy it and also have an opportunity to connect with many energy professionals. So good morning, everyone. Warm greeting from Jakarta. Honorable Mr. Jonathan Goh, Senior Officer on Energy Leader of Singapore, Director of the External Relations Energy Market Authority of Singapore. Mr. Valentin Musangwa, Second Secretary, Royal Norwegian Embassy in Jakarta. All panelists, delegates, and participants, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Executive Director of the ASEAN Center for Energy, Dr. Nuki Agia Utama, I'm delighted to welcome you all today virtually from Jakarta to the ACE Think Tank Roundtable at the Singapore International Energy Weeks. Sincere apologies from Dr. Nuki himself for not being able to join with us this morning. However, he requests me to convey his message to all of you, citing the importance of the discussion that we will have this morning on the innovation to accelerate the energy transition in the ASEAN region. As an intergovernmental organization representing the interests of 10 countries in the Southeast Asia region, we hope to gather the input and feedback from the discussion today as a reference for us in supporting the 10 countries in the region in accelerating their energy transition. Dr. Nuki conveyed his sincere appreciation to the Energy Market Authority, particularly to Mr. Jonathan Goh and the team. With the support of EMA, ACE has been a regular host at the Singapore International Energy Weeks. SIU is the region's most prominent energy event attended by thousands of energy professionals, policymakers, and commentators to share the best practice. As a melting pot of the national, regional, and global stakeholders on energy, SIU has played a significant role in pushing cooperation to escalate the energy transition in the region. EMA has provided ACE with an opportunity to share our work with the world and engage the world to support the energy transition in the region collaboratively. So our big appreciation to EMA. I would like to also extend the highest appreciation from Dr. Nuki to the government of Norway. Supported under the Norwegian ASEAN Regional Integration Program, ACE, in the collaboration with the Norwegian Institute of International Affairs, is implementing the ASEAN Climate Change and Energy Project. This event is one of the activities which aim to improve the coherence between the ASEAN energy and climate policy in the region. ACCEPT, which is the government of Norway support, is one of the major projects that is driving the energy transition in the region. So to proceed with the opening remark, allow me to invite Mr. Jonathan Goh, Director, External Relations, Energy Market Authority of Singapore, for his opening remark. Mr. Jonathan Goh, the time is yours.
Thank you, Benny, and thank you for your kind words. Good morning, everyone from Singapore. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I would first like to thank ASEAN Center for Energy, or ACE, for organizing this SIU Think Tank Roundtable on innovation to accelerate the energy transition in ASEAN today, and inviting me to deliver the opening remarks. The theme of this roundtable aligns with the dynamic energy trends in the region. Under the ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Cooperation, or APAC Phase 2, 2021 to 2025, ASEAN is stepping up its efforts to accelerate energy transition and strengthen energy resilience. This is being done through greater innovation and cooperation. The APAC Phase 2 reflects the urgent need to address issues in all energy sectors. In this regard, innovation is key to accelerating the regional energy transition. I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to chair the drafting committee for the APAC Phase 2 document, where representatives from all ASEAN member states agreed on the program areas and key strategies to guide ASEAN energy cooperation for the next 5 years. Globally, the energy transition is gradually shifting from a carbon-intensive to a cleaner energy system. The transition is accelerated by the shift from fossil fuels, oil and gas, to cleaner forms of energy, including natural gas, clean coal, solar, geothermal, wind, and hydropower. Accelerating the development of such technologies would help ASEAN to deliver its ambitious regional targets. These include the aspirational targets of increasing the component of renewable energy in ASEAN energy mix to 23% by 2025, and also increasing the renewable energy share in installed power capacity to 35% by 2025. ASEAN has also steadily increased its energy efficiency initiatives and is exploring the development of energy efficient technologies in buildings, transport, and industry. In addition, emerging low carbon technologies such as hydrogen, energy storage system and carbon capture, utilization and storage, or CCUS, are on the agenda for many ASEAN member states. It will be important to closely monitor the global trends of these technologies and explore their implementation in ASEAN. For Singapore's energy transition, we will optimize the 4 switches. While natural gas will continue to be a key fuel source for power generation, we will also maximize our solar deployment. Beyond rooftop solar PV, we are exploring innovative methods like floating solar farms, building integrated PVs, and offshore landfill due to our limited land space. We are also looking at innovative solutions to manage the intermittency of solar, like floating energy storage systems. We will continue to invest in research and development for potential low carbon technologies to help reduce Singapore's carbon footprint. In 2020, we launched the $49 million low carbon energy research funding initiative to develop promising solutions to decarbonize the power and industry sectors. This year, we announced that we will be awarding additional, or rather we have top up to, all the way to $55 million for these research funds focused on improving the technical and economic feasibility of low carbon technologies, especially on hydrogen and CCUS. EMA is also working with the industry to explore trialing the use of hydrogen-enriched natural gas as a fuel for existing power plants, as well as trialing the import of low-carbon hydrogen. These priority areas offer significant opportunities for innovation, which will support the development of such technologies and decarbonization of the power and industry sectors. That said, regional cooperation is vital to ensure that the ASEAN region can accelerate energy transition as a whole. As chair of the Regional Energy Policy and Planning Subsector Network, Singapore has lent its support to enhance many engagements with our ASEAN dialogue partners and international organizations. In May 2021, we organized the ASEAN-US workshop on decarbonization of the energy sector, and also the ASEAN IEA workshop on decarbonization of, ASEAN IEA workshop on net zero roadmap report and applications to ASEAN with the US Department of State and the Department of Energy. Singapore is supportive of innovation, information exchanges and sharing of experiences, such as this roundtable discussion convened under the Singapore International Energy Week. We look forward to lending further support to ASEAN and ACE to help the region achieve its goal under the APAC Phase 2. In conclusion, innovation and technologies will play a significant role in accelerating energy transition in this region, and will also be important in our reconstruction and recovery efforts across the global economy. I look forward to ACE's report on innovation in the energy transition and the panel discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jonathan Goh. Once again, thank you very much for the support that's been provided by Energy Market Authority and your continued support to accelerate the energy transition in the region. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Valentin Musangwa, Second Secretary, Royal Norwegian Embassy in Jakarta, to deliver his remark. Mr. Valentin Musangwa, the time is yours.
Thank you, Benny. Dear participants, speakers, friends, and colleagues, first and foremost, I would like to thank the ASEAN Center for Energy for organizing this roundtable The overarching theme is indeed of great importance to ASEAN's energy transition and post-pandemic recovery. Norway has made it a key priority in our ASEAN partnership to work with countries on energy-related issues, especially looking at how we can deliver more clean energy. This will continue to be a key priority in our renewed cooperation with ASEAN, an agreement that was adopted earlier this year. The COVID-19 pandemic has had unprecedented impact in the region and impeded economic growth and welfare for industries, households, and livelihoods. The crisis has also revealed stark inequalities in access to reliable energy, among other vulnerabilities. ASEAN's post-pandemic recovery presents an opportunity to advance the region's energy transition and revitalize growth. And with strategic planning and collaboration, we can turn this difficult time to a catalyst for investments in clean energy and bring about more accessible access to it. Renewables have proven to be more resilient during COVID-19 than other parts of the energy sector. This would suggest broader efforts in renewable energy innovation. The Norwegian government intends to establish a new climate investment fund. The intention is to mobilize investments in renewable energy and thus help phase out coal. The modalities for the funds are still being discussed, but however, our goal is to help mobilize larger investments from the private sector and perhaps reach 10 times the capital from the government. This is a very decisive contribution from Norway to help high-emitting countries towards a sustainable energy path. And we naturally hope other countries will follow suit. We must also capitalize on the global momentum towards net zero emissions. We're still lagging behind on climate targets enshrined in the Paris Agreement. And in this regard, Norway attaches great importance to ASEAN efforts to align energy and climate policy in the region at both national and also regional level. We're very glad that our support to ASEAN's climate and energy project, or also known as ACCEPT, contributes to greater coherence between energy and climate policy. In this regard, I wish to express our appreciation for the cooperation we have with ASEAN, and also all other stakeholders. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Valentin Musangwa. We also really appreciate the support that's been provided by the government of Norway. And it's very exciting to learn that this is just starting to continue the collaboration to support the energy transition in the region. So as we ended the opening remark, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Jonathan Go and Mr. Valentin Musangwa to join with us this morning. Now I would like to proceed with the next session. The economic growth of the ASEAN has been one of the most dynamic and the fastest in the world. ASEAN is one of the most prevalent investment destinations globally, and the region economy expected to grow at over 5% per year to become the fourth largest economy in the world by 2030. Yet, such economic growth prospects could be affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, which has caused unprecedented shocks to industry and sectors across the global economy. The energy sector, which is vital to economic growth, has not been spared. However, the energy has potential to play a critical role in global reproduction and recovery. As mentioned earlier, the innovation is a very key to address the issue on the energy transition. So for that, I would like to invite my two colleagues, the researcher from the ASEAN Center for Energy, to present the scene setting on their report about the innovation in the ASEAN energy transition. So to Monica Merdekawati and Suwanto, the time is yours.
Hello, thank you, Benny, for the opportunity. Good morning from Jakarta. Hello, my name is Monica Merdekawati. I'm a research analyst of ASEAN Center for Energy, particularly supporting the research activities of ASEAN Climate Change and Energy Project, or ACCEPT. Together with my colleague Suwanto, we will present the key findings of our review on the latest NDC submissions by the ASEAN member states and how these updated climate ambitions imply the needed innovations to accelerate the decarbonization in the region. Honestly, I would like to highlight a lot of interesting things from the latest NDCs, but I will keep it short to fit approximately 7 minutes time in the first half of this presentation. Apologies, I haven't seen the slide yet. Yeah, okay. Next slide, please. Yeah, as summarized here in the chronological order, the first 5 member states submitted or updated their NDCs in 2020, while the rest 5 submitted theirs in 2021. In this round of updates, most of the member states made changes to their mitigation targets, conditionality status, and the coverage of greenhouse gases emission and sectors, which in general represent higher climate commitments. Next slide, please. As illustrated here, most the member states keep the conditionality of their NDCs, but 3 that upgraded their conditionality status, they are Malaysia, who removed the conditional element, and Myanmar and Philippines, who added the unconditional targets, leaving only Cambodia as the member state with conditional targets. Next slide, please. So here the observation on the mitigation targets is based on the 3 categorizations. First is based on GHG versus non-GHG targets. I think the GHG target is quite straightforward, meaning it refers to the IPCC guideline for the GHG inventories, usually refers to carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and several other gases, while the non-GHG targets refers to the sectoral targets such as renewable energy target, forest cover, green cooking access, and etc. The second categorization refers to the targets relative to the baseline scenario versus emission intensity reduction versus trajectory of future emission, which can include peaking target. And the third group also quite straightforward, as the name reflects, the single year versus the multi-year targets within the NDC time frame. As we can see from the graph, the majority of the member states define their target in terms of GHG target relative to the baseline scenario in a specific year. What I would like to highlight here is that low PDR, which represented in yellow and Myanmar in green, indicated the most improvement. In particular, we can see there that they just defined the numerical targets in their updated NDCs. Next slide, please. In terms of projected emission reduction targets in the year 2030, most of the member states increased their commitment, except for Indonesia and Thailand. While for the case of Malaysia, actually, they raised its ambition by removing the conditional target from previous NDCs to unconditional target only in the latest NDC, while Singapore added the peaking target of 65 million tons CO2 equivalent on top of the intensity reduction. Next slide, please. For the coverage, overall, we could see the expansion of the GHG coverage in general, where Malaysia and Singapore have the most extensive coverage that cover all 7 GHGs, while Myanmar included only carbon dioxide in the latest NDC. Another important finding is that low PDR, Myanmar, and Philippines just defined their GHG coverage in their latest NDC, while Cambodia, Indonesia, and Thailand maintain the GHG coverage as it was before. Next slide, please. Here we could also see the extension of sectoral coverage in general, and we can see that energy is a priority for all the member states. The significant extension is observed on the IPPU and agriculture sector, as indicated by Brunei Darussalam, Law PDR, and Vietnam, while the other 6 member states did not change the number of sectors covered. Next slide, please. Ahead of COP26, I would like to highlight these key takeaways from 2 important documents, which indicates the critical need of innovation in ASEAN. First is the joint ministerial statement, which was adopted in last month at 39th ASEAN Ministers on Energy meeting. Here, the ministers reaffirmed the member states' common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities in pursuing energy security and energy transitions in the region, in which articulate the need of financial investment and technical support on top of cross-sectoral approach through the implementation of ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Cooperation, or APAEC. This aspiration is actually important as it represents ASEAN as one voice in pursuing lower emission energy systems. And with more ambitious NDC targets, it actually echoes the regional commitment in mitigating climate change. Therefore, what is important for ASEAN in the negotiation of COP26 are first, to emphasize the urgency of international support by highlighting how vulnerable ASEAN in the face of climate impacts and how severe the economic burden to recover from many climate disasters on top of COVID-19. And last is to clarify ASEAN's stance towards international cooperation, reiterating the intent, plan, and progress in integrating carbon pricing. Such clarifications would play a vital role in shaping the technical details of Article 6, which again underline the importance of the developed countries' support. I think I will stop here, and I would like to welcome my colleague Suwanto to present the second half of the presentation. Hello, Suwanto, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Monica. So after listening, and this is update for next slide. Yeah. After listening, and this is update from all ASEAN countries, we more or less understand the challenge and what should the countries do to accelerate energy transition. And in terms of energy transition acceleration itself, is clearly listed in the ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Cooperation that is also mentioned in the opening remarks. We bring the innovation and regional and international cooperation to accelerate energy transition and also to strengthen energy resilience, which helping to achieve energy security, energy accessibility, affordability, and also energy sustainability. Next slide, please. ASEAN that comprises 10 countries has a combined GDP of more than 7 trillion USD, with its shift from the agricultural sector to industrialization. The region is becoming one of the world's global growth drivers and a vital economic force. So due to its rapid economic growth, it is projected that ASEAN regional GDP will reach 20 trillion USD by 2040. This means that it will lead to a significant rise in energy demand. And according to our study, the 6th ASEAN Energy Outlook, it is projected that the primary energy demand will double in 2040 compared to today's condition. And we noted that fossil-based generation is still expected to dominate the energy mix in the region to secure energy supply and also to maintain a grid stability due to higher penetration from solar and wind energy. And ASEAN countries also acknowledge the need for transitioning into a low carbon economy. So it is expected that renewable installed capacity will increase in the long term. Next slide, please. Last month, ASEAN Center for Energy published the very first edition of the ASEAN Power Update 2021. And we observed that ASEAN is now shaping to pursue energy transition indicated by 33.5% of installed renewable share, and it is only 1.5% gap from 2025 target, where most of the increase are from hydro, bioenergy, solar, and wind. There were 22 gigawatt of additional power capacity last year, and we noted that 82% of the new capacity were coming from renewables, for example, new hydro in Lao PDR and also solar boom in Vietnam. The report also noted a renewable energy projection until 2025 in ASEAN, where more than 60% of new installed power capacity will be coming from renewables. Thus, it makes that the share of renewables become 2.6% above the target in 2025. Next slide, please. As explained earlier, that ASEAN will still rely on fossil fuel as the energy source, even though renewable energy is projected to be growing in the upcoming decades. And we noted that ASEAN has become net oil importer since 2005, and without any significant discoveries and exploitation of domestic resources, ASEAN would become net importer of natural gas started in 2025 and coal since 2035. This would raise the issues on energy security and affordability while we are on pursuing energy sustainability. Next slide, please. Our energy outlook has also highlighted 5 key things that guide us toward energy transition path to address energy issues and policy challenges in ASEAN based on the finding from the outlooks. First is enabling power interconnection within ASEAN to create cross-border electricity market and could make renewables investment more profitable. We are aware that ASEAN still need fossil fuels, but we should also perform the efforts to reduce the emission from fossil fuels by fuel switching, for example, by applying LNG to power, then application of clean coal technology and CCUS. And the next is as demand on cooling system is growing rapidly in ASEAN, we should also make sure that the application of cooling system is in sustainable ways. And as the transport sector contributed around a quarter of fuel consumption and emissions, we should also consider adopting an electric vehicle and the utilization of biofuel to substitute the oil products. Lastly, to improve the quality of life and human health, we could also promote electric cookstove to replace traditional biomass for cooking. Next slide, please. The outlook also identified the policy implication and recommendation for some key energy consuming sectors. For example, first on the transport sector, apart from promoting EVs and biofuels, we could also keep pursuing the vehicle efficiency and then strengthen vehicle emission standards and make a good public transportation. As the industrial sector consumes huge amount of energy, promoting energy efficiency and renewable energy adoption could also be applied. For the residential and commercial sector, we might apply stricter efficiency standards for the appliances to achieve energy savings. And in the power sector, we may conduct improvement on demand side and deployment of energy storage while continuing integration of renewable energy into the grid. Next slide, please. So what's kind of innovation that could be applied to accelerate energy transition? There are many innovations to accelerate energy transition to fight the climate change on technological, financial, and policy and process innovation. So for example, on the technological, the establishment, we could, on the research and development department or institution to bridge lab to market. And then we could also improve existing technology so we have a better products in the future. Next is grid integration of renewable penetration and allowing interconnection between countries and also some kind of digitalization of the process by utilizing energy Internet of Things concept. The next one is measuring decarbonization technologies such as carbon capture utilization and storage and also hydrogen utilization in the transport sector, for example. On financial, we could allocate the budget to develop research and development. Apart from this, to attract investment, we could build new business model on RE, for example, granting special tax rate or also incentive. We could also design regional energy market to make cross-border transmission, including power and gas, and set competitive pricing mechanism. In addition, we should also have a solid policy and regulatory framework and strong commitment from the government to energy availability and also implement carbon pricing as well. Having strong regional and international collaboration would also strengthen the capability on financial support, as well as the effort to build a triple helix collaboration. And lastly, the social part would also be important to gain a public acceptance on the importance of renewable energy in the future. I think that's all, and thank you for your kind attention. Back to you, Mr. Wayne.
Thank you very much, Monica Merdekawati and Suwanto, for giving us a sensitive presentation where you highlighting how the APAC, the regional blueprint document on energy cooperation, is really emphasizing on the point of innovation. And also very well noted that on your information, last year, the ASEAN installed around 22 gigawatt new power capacity cumulatively. and 82% of it was renewable. This is a notable new trend and for the region and a very optimistic message, especially as we know COVID-26 is coming in a few days. However, we share the same view with all of you. We need to do more. We need the innovation to accelerate the effort. So now time for the panel discussion. We have the privilege as the 5 experts that are representing the innovation and ideas on the energy cooperation, energy transition in the region are joining with us to answer the $1 trillion question, how ASEAN can innovate to accelerate the energy transition. Before we go one by one to hear from them, allow me to introduce all of the 5 experts who are joining with us this morning. The first one joining from Singapore is Mr. Eddie Tan, the Vice President, Integrated Solution, Singapore and Southeast Asia Sembcorp Industry. Mr. Eddie Tan is responsible for the portfolio of offering under the Sembcorp suite of sustainability solution in Singapore and the Southeast Asia. These include integrated energy, water, waste, and digital solution aimed to help customers meet their environmental sustainability target. And let's just say, greeting Mr. Eddie Tan, that if I can invite you to share your introductory remarks. Mr. Eddie Tan, that Sembcorp Industry is a leading energy and urban solution provider, driven by its purpose to do good and play its part in building a sustainable future. So, Mr. Eddie, would you mind telling us more about what Sembcorp is doing to drive the region's energy transition?
Okay, thank you, Benny. Maybe let me start with, am I audible? Okay. Let me start with Singapore first. I think we just heard from Jonathan from the Energy Market Authority about the 4 switches that helps to keep the lights on here in Singapore. Sembcorp would strive to be a leader in all 4 switches to support this energy transition. And the 4 switches again are, we want to be a leader in natural gas, leader in solar, leader in low carbon alternatives, and the regional clean energy imports. Sembcorp actually has really helped Singapore lead the transition from the energy sources from oil to gas back many years ago. Gas will remain very important in the foreseeable future as Singapore's main switch. Sembcorp is currently the largest gas importer in Singapore. On the solar front, we are also growing capabilities across all types of solar, like ground-mounted, rooftop solar, and more recently, floating solar. We operate the 60 megawatt peak floating solar in Tengeh Reservoir. This is one of the world's largest inland floating solar. This is an example of a capability that we are bringing to the region to deploy such floating solar projects on the plentiful inland water bodies we have in Southeast Asia. On the topic of regional power grid, we have announced 2 days ago on the development of the solar with backup of energy storage importing from Indonesia via subsea cables to grow the regional solar market. As for low carbon alternatives such as decarbonized hydrogen, I think back a couple of weeks ago, we also announced we have started a feasibility study on hydrogen supply chain commercialization with our partners Chiyoda and Mitsubishi, which will benefit the region as well for such alternative fuel options in the future. We do have one of the largest energy storage plant, battery storage plant in UK, which we are also progressively porting those capabilities in the region to help grow the very intermittent renewable energy. Other innovations we have in Singapore includes a virtual power plant. We are also looking at the more circularity economy of solar by looking to solar panel recycling. This can all be introduced into the Southeast Asia region to help accelerate the energy transition on the whole. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zaidi. And the announcement on the opening first day of the CUs is really a massive progress. I think that will be helps ASEAN. I think it's not only Singapore and Indonesia to being involved, but ASEAN to escalate its energy transition. Then I would like to move to our second expert. We have Ms. Jennifer Tay, partner and infrastructure leader from PricewaterhouseCoopers Singapore, who also based in Singapore. Mr. Jennifer Tay is a partner in the firm's deal advisory practice with the experience in large-scale infrastructure financial transaction with the public and the private sectors in Asia. She is also the co-lead of the PwC Southeast Asia infrastructure team. She has around 15 years of experience in infrastructure, particularly in large-scale financial transaction and strategic advisory, supporting both public and the private sector across the ASEAN region. She has a wide range of expertise, including transportation, power and energy, and telecommunication. So to Jennifer, that I learned that PwC isn't just a business, but it's seen as an ever-changing hub of the collaboration and creativity. That was saying that solutions are co-created with the client and the wider industrial players to build trust in society and solve the important problem. So we do have the very important problem of energy transition. So what does PwC brings in creating this solution? Jennifer, for you to respond.
Thank you very much, Benny. And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. A very big thank you to ASEAN Center for Energy and SIEW for inviting me onto this panel to speak about energy transition. My name is Jennifer and I lead the infrastructure practice in PwC Singapore. Energy transition is a very important part of the wider landscape towards net zero. And PwC is very involved in this globally. As a global network, we are working towards a net zero in 2030. And we continue to mitigate the impact we have today by offsetting our emission through high quality carbon credits. From 2030 onwards, we hope to remove all our remaining emissions to achieve a net zero across our network. In Singapore, PwC Singapore will be launching an ESG Center of Excellence. The Center of Excellence hope to bring together a network of experts, including energy transition experts. We'll be working with our clients and experts from compliance, strategies, financing, tax, and legal to assist our clients and partners in their net zero and energy transition journey. What we realize in PwC is that energy transition is a multidisciplinary effort, and we can bring these resources from our global network to our clients. We have recently launched our new thought leadership, Energy Transition Readiness in Southeast Asia, which we look into how ready countries in Southeast Asia are in terms of energy transition. We hoped through this thought leadership to shine some light on the uneven readiness in the energy transition and highlight some challenges and trends we're seeing in the market. I can go into this a bit more details later. Today, we're working with many clients in the region in various types of energy transition transactions. A large part of this are in renewable energy. For example, we have regional clients who are looking at renewable energy platforms to acquire into them. We helped evaluate these investment opportunities by bringing together commercial, industry, financial, tax, and legal perspective. We look at the risk profile of these projects and advise clients on commercial, financial, and tax risks. We don't really just want to highlight risks, as Benny highlighted. We want to be helping clients to solve important problems. So in transactions like this, we hope to bring to the client value creation opportunities as well, and look at what are the value synergies they can create out of these transactions to make these projects bankable. In the recent PUB floating solar project in Tengah, we also played a a significant role in advising PUB in the transaction, which we are very proud and happy to be involved. I think the interesting part of this transaction is the role that PUB has played and that it has helped to catalyze the private sector through allowing the private sector to bring to the government very innovative financing structure and commercial structure. And of course, Sembcorp is the private sector that won the tender. And the effective cost and risk sharing within the project is one of many innovations. We are also working with clients in areas like climate-based solutions, not a very traditional area which PwC worked in, but we are bringing together our expertise also in infrastructure structuring to help solve the commercial structuring issues in climate-based solutions. So this is something we are involved in globally, and many of our clients are looking at, and I'm personally very involved in these transactions too. I would say another example of how PwC brings together our global network will be in hydrogen. So in Germany, we have a team of experts looking at the technical and economics of hydrogen implementation. And we're helping clients to look at what are the business cases that can be developed to implement and deploy hydrogen. There's even an online tool which our clients can now access online. If you're interested, please search for it on our website. The tool helps clients to assess how ready they are in their hydrogen business case. Now, I think as a network, what we realize is that the problem that one client is facing in one territory tend to have a similar case study in other regions, and as a network, we come together and we want to bring that network capability to our client, whether it's in compliance, whether it's in transaction advisory or strategies. Well, I can keep going, but I would like to pass the time back to Benny. Thank you, Benny.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. And then we will go deeper on the report that you mentioned earlier. But now allow me to move to the third expert, Dr. Retno Gumilang Dewi. She's joining us from Bandung, Indonesia. That's Dr. Retno Gumilang Dewi, lecturer at the Chemical Engineering Department and also head of Center for Research on Energy Policy at the Bandung Institute of Technology, Indonesia. She has more than 25 years of experience in research concerning the energy and environmental issue through intensive involvement in studies, energy modeling work, energy subsidy reform, assessment of advanced and clean energy technology efficiency, and various sectors. So to Dr. Retno Gumilang, ITB is the first technical university in Indonesia established with a mission to serve science and technology to develop the nation. So would you mind to tell us that how does the ITB play its role in driving the energy transition in Indonesia, the largest country in the region with a very complex energy challenge? Dr. Retno Gumilang, time is yours.
Thank you very much for the time, and I would like to share what ITB have already support for some institution, including the government, to prepare how is the energy transition and the roadmap for energy transition. Particularly, we prepare for NDC document and also long-term strategy for Indonesia. And at the moment, we are still discussion on how to achieve a net zero emission because of, as you mentioned, economic in ASEAN is dynamics, and we have to consider this one. Can somebody share my presentation in only 5 pages, I think. And next, please. Yeah. Shifting the global economy onto renewable energy is the key combating of climate change and while improving quality of life and also increasing the economic development. And to do this, national energy system must transition first and fast changes here. As we know that we have to achieve net zero emission, and then we have to implement more renewable energy and also other clean technology. Indonesia energy face a situation in uncertainty to decide a transition because of we know that our country is rely on fossil fuel, particularly coal for our power plant. But we know that in the other side, it is demanded to contribute a bigger role in efforts to mitigate global climate change. Because of for forest sector only, it's not enough. So we need deep decarbonization toward net zero emission, particularly in the energy sector. Energy Indonesia faces a situation of uncertainty in deciding a transition that require a much larger utilization of renewable energy. And how does ITB play in its role in driving the energy transition in Indonesia? Because of I just mentioned before that we also support the government to do some modeling and also give input to the government for the formulation of the policy. Next, please. Yeah. And we know that this is the target of Indonesia to become net zero emission in 2060, not in 2050, because of it's difficult to Indonesia to achieve before that. But this is net zero emission. It's not only energy sector, but net with Polu. We know that in the Polu itself between to 2030, the net sink for Polu, but for other sector, 5 sector is speaking is 2030, between 2030 and 2035. Yeah. We see in the right side, this is the GHG emission of energy sector between 2010 until 2060. We see that this power sector, it's much lower for the CO2 emission, but still in industry sector is difficult to achieve the mitigation because of the type of energy in industry cannot just replace with the other type of energy, and still using high heat and thermal that must be supplied by maybe coal and gas. Yeah. And aiming to the green target, Indonesia has the opportunity to transition its energy system by steeply reduce the carbon intensity in all sectors of the economy. And this transition is we known as a deep decarbonization. To achieve deep decarbonization, because of we see that in energy sector itself is the highest contributor, then it will need for negative CO2 emission technology, for example, is BECCS, biomass energy, and CCS or CCUS. Our contribution at ITB is have a center of excellence for CCS and CCUS. So, the last our work is how to mapping out the CCS, CCUS between the source of the CO2 and also the oil, the depleted oil and gas that can be used as a storage. And for the biomass energy, we also promote for the co-firing in power sector with the PLN, and also for the private sector like a pulp and paper industry. Next, please. And pandemic scenario requires an economic growth at least more than 5%, and almost 6%, more than 6% after 2026 or 23 until 2030, because of we would like to become a developed countries in after 2045 because of 100 years for Indonesia. And 2045. So after 2043, we will have a high economic development. Then we see that there's if we increase for our economic growth, and the implication is we know that there's a significant increase also in energy use, and we see that there's the gross output itself. If we want to increase our GDP, and then the gross output or economic structure will rely on not only in the services but also for manufacture, and will be a big contributor. And then the final energy demand compared the 2010, then we can see that this for the final energy consumption will increase 3.8 times compared to the 2010, and then electricity consumption 10 times compared to the 2010, and then non-electricity consumption will increase 2.7 70 times compared to the 2010. Yeah. Next, please. And then this is the pillars for decarbonization because of the high increase for electricity and also other energy consumption, particularly for the fossil-based. And then we need to have a decarbonization in energy sector. Then there are three pillars. That is, one is aggressive efficiency improvement in demand side, and then will decrease significantly energy intensity more than 70%. And then the pillar 2 is decarbonization of electricity provision or of clean, green, low and zero carbon emission energy. So the use of low carbon emitting fuels and CCS would significantly electricity emission intensity, almost more than 90% decrease. But for the electrification for end use, then we know that is all final consumption will move to electricity. Then we assume that is a electric vehicle and also substitution of fossil fuel-based energy system to electricity in commercial and also household will reduce fossil fuel combustion and reduce emission because of we control in the power sector. And then electrification and use will decrease, will increase 23% compared to the 2010. Next, please. And deep decarbonization and challenges of the implementation itself, we know that there's a deployment of biofuel, farm-made biodiesel, and also hydrocarbon because of at the moment Pertamina, our oil and gas company, prepare for the production of the biohydrocarbon and also bioethanol. Even it's difficult, maybe we move to palm oil gasoline. We call that is bensin sawit, bensa. And for transportation, while considering the provision of sustainable plantation for raw material because of there are moratorium for palm oil plantation after 2030. Non-renewable power uses more efficient fossil fuel, for example, like IGCC, ultra supercritic, because of now the government have a regulation, at least for the power, coal power plant is must be subcritical. And also integrated with the renewable energy, as mentioned before, because of PLN start using biomass co-firing and also integrated with the CCS or CCUS because of we have already some feasibility study for the implementation CCUS from the CO2 from a power plant in industry. For example, it is in the under Marubeni Group, and also from industry, fertilizer industry, and also oil and gas processing plant. Aggressive development of renewable energy, for example, like introducing solar PV rooftop is now become a challenge for government policy, but we know that it's limited because of when we calculate for DKI Jakarta only, if 70% Jakarta will be used as a rooftop, and then we also only have a 38 gigawatt, and it's impossible we implement 70% area of Jakarta for the rooftop, maybe only 10 until 25% that possible. And aggressive decarbonization in the power generation sector will reduce the carbon footprint of electricity from the grid network, which in turn will reduce the carbon footprint of products related to the use of electricity from the grid. Yeah. And thereby, because of now carbon footprint is important for the product, all product, and the buyer will also have a policy for non-trade barrier, then we have to lowering the carbon footprint of the industrial product. Yeah. In the industrial sector, more efficient use of energy and lower carbon emission will encourage improvement in the carbon footprint of the product produced. Renewable energy development, yeah, there are some typically that can be developed, and power generation, for example, is already established and has been mastered in biofuel-based, hydro, wind, geothermal. But for the solar rooftop, maybe this is the new one. Yeah. What needs to be continuous developed is biofuel based on agriculture waste and algae, solar PV, biomass co-firing, gasification, and also organic runoff cycle. Waste fuel power plants and also solar PV, wind, nuclear, and now the government just start with the hydrogen, green hydrogen, and also blue hydrogen that is already under research and pilot plan in the Pertamina. The development of renewable energy needs to consider availability is intermittent. It requires energy storage, yeah, because of if we use renewable energy, for example, like solar PV that is intermittent as a base load, then we need more battery. And to encourage the development of renewable energy, necessary to have the right pricing policy and divert subsidy to encourage the development of renewable energy and implement of feed-in tariff. And currently, the government just released a policy on carbon tax. Yeah. Next, please. And the challenge of the implementation need to develop local capacity in renewable because of even we have a solar PV, but it's not easy to install solar PV in our home, and wind power and also bioenergy. Need to reduce coal use significantly because of we know that our economy is rely on coal, and then the coal itself is related to our stranded assets. Yeah. The negative impact could be lessened by keep using coal, but with a high efficiency system, and also equipped with the CCS or CCUS and co-firing with the biomass. And we focus on the CCUS because of we use the carbon capture and utilization and storage for enhanced oil recovery or enhanced gas recovery. Next, please. And this is energy sector development challenge in Indonesia, high economic growth, increasing energy demand, and trend trajectory of changes in energy technology from fuels to electricity. And energy security and resilience support economic development, but also meet the energy demand of modern society with the high GA will increase our demand significantly. National energy policy move away from oil, but it's not enough because of we also have to move from other fossil because of we still rely on coal. But if we don't want to move significantly for the coal, then we have to implement clean coal technology and equip with the CCS. Current technology increasing energy consumption and also GHG emission on the one hand, global commitment to addressing climate change to achieving the target of the Paris Agreement. The need for pollution-free air quality, especially in urban area, and also energy distribution challenges for archipelagic countries, and also electricity supply challenges. Next, please. Yeah. Yeah, this is power generation mix to achieve the net zero in 2060, then the right side, yeah. And we have to implement some technology here for the generation mix. Even there is still debatable because of some group don't want to implement a nuclear, but one group want to phase out from coal, but have to implement more renewable energy and nuclear. And the left side, this is our long-term strategy. LTS is just submitted for UNFCCC. This is for power generation mix. Yeah. Next, please. Yeah, thank you very much. This is all my presentation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Retno Gumilang. Next, we have Dr. Andrea Lovato, Executive Vice President, Business Development, Head of Renewable and Hydrogen Development from ASEAN Power. Dr. Lovato is a seasonal industry expert in the power utility space with a focus on independent power and desalination process developed, financed, constructs, and operated through concession or utility outsourcing contract models. it has secured financial closing of the various industry landmark projects, including the Nuru project in Morocco and Dewa project in Dubai and Saudi Arabia. So Dr. Andrea Lovato, I understand that ASEAN Power is producing power to meet the consumption needs of over 81 million people every day and leading various renewable energy projects worldwide. So how does the innovation that ASEAN Power has to be translated into this region, considering the complexity of the energy landscape in the Southeast Asia? Dr. Andrea, your time, sir.
Benny, thank you very much, and good morning, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, really glad to participate in this discussion and answer your questions. We as Aqua Power, we have been at the center, I would say, of the energy transition in the past 6 to 8 years with the development of several renewable projects, today as well hydrogen. In our portfolio, 42 plus gigawatt, 30% of those is renewables. And among those, we have been contributing, I would say, in terms of reduction of costs for renewable in solar and in wind, and as well in what is called thermosolar in terms of applications. I have few slides, but I'd like to just give few numbers on this. Why we all talk in terms of decarbonization? For a simple reason, because obviously we are all committed as a global community to reduce temperature or limit temperature increase to well below 2 degrees before 2050, and recommended level is obviously 1.5 degrees. And this is for a well-known reason, because obviously if the temperature will increase, there will be melting of ice. Is very well accepted that a rise of sea level will create absolutely exceptional damages to our economies globally and also where to live. So therefore, the commitment that has been taken in Paris and maybe will renew strongly in Glasgow today is a must for every one of us. If you see from this graph, obviously if we continue to emit as we are today, as a global community, we will not reach that target. So emission reduction is a must for every one of us, is a must for every other countries participating in this, even though we not target carbon removal, or just target what is called net emissions. Next slide, please. Net zero emissions. You will see here is a very small, unfortunately, but I'm just going to point out 2 or 3 numbers here. Today, the total emission is 33.9 gigatons CO2 per year, approximately 40, 33 to 40 was 2 years ago, already reduced in the last 2 to 3 years to 33.9. But this covers several sectors in the industry. It's not only power that contribute to this. It's the industry in general, it's the transportation, it's the constructions, another sector like food industry sector contribute to that. So all this sector needs to change, and is accepted that there are few pillars for this to happen. To go to in 2030 to 21.1 gigatons and 2050 to zero, what is called a net zero. The pillars are there. One pillar is obviously covering renewables. Another pillar is covering what is today called green hydrogen, substituting in several sectors what is gas, what is oil, with a green fuel that is well accepted in terms of impact, and as well in terms of today of emission, because obviously you will have green hydrogen produced from water and renewable energy, and when you will burn green hydrogen, will you produce water again? So the impact itself is very minor. So what you will see here is in 2030, the additional capacity renewable globally is in the range of 1,000 gigawatt per year. We will need to add approximately 150 million tons per year of green hydrogen. And we need to also increase electrification. To target to 2050, 90% of all capacity globally need to be by renewables. So means 70% of the 90 trillions watt hour that is produced required globally need to be done by renewable. Huge level of investment has to be done globally. So 260 billion US dollar is acceptable. That's a number that's been evaluated by International Energy Agency. Per year has to be deployed globally from 2030. And from 2030 to 2050, the level of investment is 800 billion US dollar per year. And this is unscapable. We need to do that if we want to avoid the climate effect. But there is also an important, if you go to the next slide, there is an important side that we need to consider as well, and I think we as a company globally, we have demonstrated that, is that the renewables and even green hydrogen today make sense economically for all our regions and countries in different manners, obviously. This is you will see presented in this slide, what are the numbers prevalent in relation to technologies in area with high renewable resources. But renewable makes sense in terms of economics, in terms of energy independence. And this is a good news because obviously we need to deploy large investment, but this large investment for the good of the humankind and the good of our countries, with something that is already economical today. You see solar photovoltaic today is down to 1.1 US dollar cents per kilowatt hour in certain regions. So we can say the average globally is between 1 and 2, according to the size of the project, according to the different regions that solar photovoltaic is deployed. This is the cheapest today way to produce electricity. Obviously, you don't know, it's not electricity for 24 hours, electricity when the sun shines. Wind as well follows suit. Onshore between 2.5 and 3 US dollar cents per kilowatt hour. Wind offshore is reducing rapidly in the range of 6.5, 7.5 US dollar per kilowatt hour. And then we have also what is called dispatchable solar today, demonstrated as well in certain projects with developed in certain region, down to 7.1 US dollar cents per kilowatt hour. This means that dispatchable solar, where you collect during the day, you store in a thermal storage, and then you deliver in a dispatchable mode like any other power plant during the night when the sun is not there, is competitive with certain combined cycle plant in using gas. For sure is competitive with oil-fired power plant. And obviously we have application for BESS. Another important part is to indicate you have there the numbers that gives you what is the cost in terms of combined cycle coal today as well and oil-fired. And green hydrogen. What is green hydrogen today? Green hydrogen has been going through a reduction of cost. We are busy to develop very large projects. Obviously, this project will start from the Middle East in terms of high resource, but will be deployed and exported in the Asian region as well. Today, the cost of green hydrogen is in the range of 250 US dollar per megawatt hour. So it's a bit higher than what is the cost of oil, but the expected curve reduction will bring the reduction of green hydrogen already in 2030 at a par with the oil, 50 US dollar per megawatt hour, or what we call 2 US dollar per kilo in terms of hydrogen. And the expectation is following the next 5 to 10 years to bring it at a par with gas, contributed to this economical revolutions. So what is the message here is that the renewables is already a good means, economical means for all of us to be implemented. There are means to implement this in all the regions that we operate in Asia. Obviously, there are challenges that are different in countries to countries in Asia in terms of development. The land availability is an issue. Obviously, land availability is not an issue in the Middle East, not an issue in Northern Africa. It is not an issue when we talk about offshore wind. That is something that we will tackle and solve in terms of, it's been also mentioned before, that as floating solar is one solution of that. Floating solar is absolutely something that will make absolutely sense for Indonesia as well. It will make absolutely sense for other area in Southeast Asia. Offshore wind is again a very important part of the development that will happen happen already today in the Asian region, and hydrogen will also be a part of the development, not only the utilization, but the production of hydrogen in certain area in the Asian region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Andrea. Because I have many interesting points that I would like to address question, but we will keep it first because we have no Ms. Sirpa Javanpa, Director, Southeast Asia Energy Transition Partnership. Ms. Sirpa has worked in the Southeast Asia region from 1990. Initially with the UNDP to implement the new economic management system in the region transition countries. So she has also extensive career at the ASEAN Development Bank for around 20 years, focused on infrastructure planning, implementation, policy, and institutional strengthening, including in the energy and other infrastructure sectors. At ETP, Ms. Sirpa is spearheading both efforts to accelerate the energy transition in the Southeast Asia. So to Ms. Sirpa, that through ETP, you aim to empower countries in this region to transition toward an energy system that simultaneously ensure environmental sustainability, economic growth, and energy security. So what kind of innovation structures is being implemented through ETP to achieve this goal? Ms. Sirpa, the time is yours.
Thank you very much, Benny. And thank you very much for inviting ETP to the Singapore International Energy Week and this session on innovation in the center of energy transition. Indeed, innovation is very much central to energy transition. We have new financial concepts, we got new technology, new partnership, new market mechanisms. Energy transition is said to be the greatest change management project since industrialization. So yes, my name is Sirpa Järvenpää, and I am Director of the Energy Transition Partnership in Southeast Asia, which in itself is a new platform for collaboration and innovative at that. So let me just say a few words about ETP before I return to your question, Benny. So we are a multi-stakeholder partnership comprising governments and philanthropies. Our membership currently includes the governments of France, Germany, United Kingdom, and Canada, and soon more. And I invite others around the table to consider our membership, as well as philanthropies such as Children's Investment Fund Foundation, IKEA Climate Foundation, Sequoia Climate Fund, and others. And yes, again, we are seeking to broaden our membership. So these diverse members capitalize on their relative strengths to make those bold steps toward energy transition, and they focus on empowering the countries in the region to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, as well as to contribute to the Paris goals that were mentioned here by earlier speakers. We go at this through a methodology that is inclusive and collaborative. That's key for ETP. Based on assessment of the barriers to energy transition, we work through 4 strategic outcome areas of policy alignment with the climate commitments and de-risking of finance for energy efficiency and renewable energy projects, expanding smart grids to remove that physical barrier from energy transition, and building knowledge and awareness on energy transition. We don't work alone. We have a number of aligned programs that we consider our sister programs. We consider them our twin sisters. with not identical, so varying capabilities, and we share resources and programs and try and reinforce one another's perspectives and support one another. We work through technical assistance and capacity building and under the UN fiduciary controls, as well as competitive processes. So we support policy dialogue and capacity building through those competitive instruments. And here in Southeast Asia, we have prioritized 3 countries, Indonesia, Philippines, and Vietnam, because, as previous speakers have mentioned, their continued reliance on fossil fuels in the energy systems, but also the rapidly growing demand, as well as rapidly growing economies and populations. So with those few words, Benny, let me turn back to your question. So when we look at the innovative structures for what do we really need for the energy transition, first of all, we need to understand better what is the problem like. So in terms of the policies, for instance, they do lack alignment currently with the climate goals. For instance, we have been talking about it already, policies are financing fossil fuel subsidies, which create less than a level playing field. There is lack of access to finance, and there is lack of bankable projects. For instance, currently local financing institutions are not comfortable with the savings-based cash flows of energy efficiency investment projects, thus starving these innovative investments from finance. The limited capacity of the infrastructure is impeding the march of renewable energy into energy mix by simply curtailing or rejecting wind and solar energy, the variable renewable energy from the system. And then there is lack of how-to knowledge, the access to the current day best practices, technological innovations, and know-how in terms of how to pursue the frontiers of energy transition. So, but it's clear also that these impediments are solvable. We have seen examples from other countries, but what's in the way is largely the political economy and misalignment of interests and incentives, and lack of awareness of realistic options, which only come about through thorough study and demonstration projects and proof. So the innovative structures that we need are really structured collaboration approaches with stronger alignment. So we at ETP, we bring parties closer together to push toward one direction under shared goals and action plans. And platforms like this, where collaboration is possible under transparent and neutral conditions, becomes therefore possible. So one example from our work is a collaboration that is in making for Asian Just Transition Global Platform that ETP is preparing together with the World Bank and other partners. So this platform will bring the stakeholders that are standing to be affected by the early retirement of coal power plants and mines, both from informal and formal sectors, together to a dialogue to access learning opportunities and lessons from across the world. So ETP brings to this platform a focus on the partnership itself to ensure that duplication and overlaps and gaps are addressed to enable that speedy delivery that these stakeholders deserve. And in this case, ETP serves as kind of a train station, connecting the stakeholders with the services and support from multiple sources. So that way, creating also trust through the neutrality, given that we are a multi-stakeholder platform and operating under a UN flag, and also confidence and clarity through coordination. So innovation is really the lack of turf. It's the effort to foster alignment of interest and coordination of the tools and capacity and collaboration in funding and delivery. So Benny, there's a lot of frustration around the last 30 years of that experience we've had with the TA technical assistance and the limitations or limited coordination. So ETP, for instance, offers one such solution. The reasons why government and philanthropies are joining ETP, in fact, is related. because ETP offers a platform for alignment and coordination, and of course, related benefits such as reduced costs from blending funding and working together, as well as what I've mentioned already earlier, the neutrality benefits and the value for money benefits that come through competitive processes. But also, and innovatively, the coordination benefits, as well as the greater chance at influencing. So squarely returning to your question, what we are raising is the ambition among the leadership within and outside of the region, and even here among us today, regarding how partnerships can be inclusive, innovative, and become drivers of change themselves. Thank you, Benny.
Thank you, Sirpa. And I hear your word frustration. So let's allow me to circle to Jennifer that Sirpa said frustration. This could be. So I mean, I go back with the report that you wrote, Jennifer. You wrote report on the readiness, the energy transition readiness in the Southeast Asia. So I mean, you identified 6 key criteria to assess this readiness. Well, the question is this region is ready on this energy transition? I mean, Sirpa has mentioned about the First Nation. So how do you see that, Jennifer?
Sure. Thanks, Benny. Yeah, so I think in terms of the report, we look at 6 different criteria, including accessibility, reliability, affordability, sustainability, smartness, and regional trading. Across the region, I think most countries scored very well in terms of accessibility, reliability, and affordability. This is, of course, a testament of the effort which the regional government has put in place in the last few decades to achieve close to 100% electricity coverage for the population. But these 3 criteria, while they form the fundamental of energy transition, they are not sufficient. More needs to be done in the criteria of sustainability, energy smartness, and trading in order for the region to be ready for energy transition. So we largely, through our assessment, group the countries in Southeast Asia into 3 broad categories. So I'll start with the first category, the first group, which is mainly Myanmar falling into this group. It is observed that there is an urgent need to meet the basic energy need of the people. Improving electrification and reserve margins so that people can get access to reliable electricity is very fundamental. The reliance of hydroelectric power today needs to be diversified so that the generation sources can be more diverse and more renewable sources can be brought into the energy mix. Of course, Myanmar, in this case, based on our assessment, is the least ready for energy transition. Now, the third group, I'll come back to the second group in a bit, but the third group, we have grouped Thailand and Singapore under the third group because both these countries have achieved basic energy needs and have some success in terms of pursuing green energy and smarter energy. What needs to be done is increasing the share of renewable and a higher penetration of smarter technology like electric vehicle, growing distributed solar generation in the power sector in the expected future. Now, so these Thailand and Singapore, we classify them in the third group as being able to drive innovation and energy excellence and most ready for energy transition. Now, in the second group is where most Southeast Asia country falls into. So the rest like Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Brunei, Philippines, all fall into this group. The basic energy needs of people have been achieved. There is electrification and affordable and reliable electricity. But the mix of energy needs to be cleaner in future. And for energy transition to take place smoothly, more investment needs to go into making the energy system smarter. So countries in this category should look at how they can make use of technology such as smart metering and monitoring and grid operations to meet to make the energy transition smoother. We also observe some trends in terms of energy transition. We think that in the future, the energy sector will continue to become greener, no doubt about it. Coal will be phased out, and there will be an increase in uptake in renewable energy, and we are seeing that already. But there will be there should be an increased focus on energy efficiency. So whereas we are growing our capacity in renewable energy, we should also look at retrofitting some of the older, for example, buildings in some of these cities or manufacturing facilities to make sure that energy efficiency is improved as well, so that we don't, we don't on one hand increase energy capacity and on the other hand be wasting all this in inefficient operations. One very interesting, I think, development in ASEAN that I think will be very critical for energy transition, and Benny, you are very, very involved in that, is the ASEAN Power Grid. This is an area which I think the regional government have committed to and should step up their collaboration in building up the ASEAN Power Grid. The interconnected grid system will help to increase the uptake of renewable energy, and it will also help to boost energy security and facilitate Southeast Asia energy transition journey. So I think in all, the study points to a pretty bright future, but I think a lot more collaboration needs to be done, especially in Myanmar and in some of the other ASEAN countries, in order for us to have a smooth transition.
Right. So
thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. That's going to be, you mentioned Singapore and Thailand. So I mean, it's going to be, but I go with Mr. Eddie that, so Thailand is not in your list so far. I mean, you have in Singapore and Vietnam, right? And then it's again a question of readiness of the energy transition in the region. To my knowledge, that it's only a tiny fraction of the same portfolio on the renewable energy in this region. So, I mean, question to the business perspective. So, do you think it's not ready yet, the country, the region, to embrace the energy transition, or what happened, Mr. Eddie?
So your homework on our portfolio is correct. Majority of our renewable assets are in China and India for obvious reasons, because land or water required for those large utility scales projects are just more abundant in those regions. Our current renewable presence in Southeast Asia actually is not just in Singapore and Vietnam. We are increasingly in Indonesia and Myanmar. So just for comparison, in Singapore, we're about 370 megawatt peak now, spread across 2,000 sites, 2,000 plus sites in Singapore. A majority of them on residential public housing roof. Because of this land and water scarcity, utility scale to hit those gigawatt projects will be very few and far in between as compared to other regions where we just get more land. In Vietnam, we have close to 50 megawatt peak now, but Vietnam is kind of a victim of its own very successful FIT program, which leads to an increasing frequent curtailment from EVN, the grid operator, for solar plant operator like ourselves to go on zero export mode. That could be like 12 o'clock noon when the sun is shining, we are asked to shut it down. So these areas are seeing some more challenging growth, especially in the case of Myanmar as well, where we do have a footprint there, but the political situation is kind of slowing things down a bit. Now back to your question on Indonesia. ASEAN, as one of the ASEAN largest economy and being so resource rich, I personally feel that Indonesia will be playing a critical role, not just for the region, but also in the global transition to a low carbon future. We have heard that ASEAN made some commitment in the 2015 Paris Agreement to have an aspiration target of 23% of the total energy from renewable sources by 2025. Now that's just 3+ years away, and there's still a gap, and Indonesia is still one of the world's largest producer and exporter of coal. But in recent years, I've seen Indonesia started to shift away from being a resource-based economy by encouraging green effort in the private sector and foreign investments in these sustainable initiatives. For example, PLN have recently commenced work on the largest floating solar project in South Asia, funded by the Abu Dhabi-based Masdar Group. I am cautiously optimistic that the gradual phasing out of coal-fired plants and pivoting towards renewable will help Indonesia achieve its net zero targets by 2060. Now back to Sembcorp. Since 1990s, we have already been in Indonesia, playing a key role in Indonesia economic growth. This includes launching the government support Kendal Industrial Park in central Java, and Sembcorp is the largest pipe natural gas supplier from, and Indonesia is Sembcorp's largest pipe natural gas supplier from the West Natuna gas field. We have heard recently from Malaysia that our green electrons is unlikely coming from the north. So we must in parallel now look towards the south, for example, Indonesia, or even more southeast to Australia, where we get our green electrons. You might have heard 2 days ago, Sembcorp with the Batam utility company, PLN Batam, and developer Sruyagan has signed a exclusive joint development agreement to develop a large-scale integrated solar and ESS project in the BKK region or Batam Bintang Karimun region. Now, this project consists of approximately 1 gigawatt peak of solar generation capability and a large-scale battery to manage the intermittency of the clean energy export. Now, not leaving the local community behind, some of the clean energy generated will actually be supplied to the local communities, and the rest is proposed to be transmitted via subsea cables to Singapore. I think Sembcorp has been and will be a long-term partner of Indonesia to develop more renewable projects to contribute to Indonesia energy transition. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eddie. Then I assume Dr. Andrea is also share the same optimistic. It's a bright, like Jennifer says, the bright futures. I mean, Mr. Eddie is also mentioned it's exciting. So Achma Power is coming to this region as well. So how do you see that, Dr. Andrea, it's going to be whether this country is also ready to escalate this process on the energy transition?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we came to the region a few years ago, and we are established in 3 geographies, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Philippines. With Indonesia, we have a very, I would say, a big plan, because Indonesia obviously has an enormous potential in terms of what is the renewable and generally also the general power request and demand. We have been busy in the past months in Indonesia with floating solar, with PV and battery application. We have been ranked L1 in several bids up for PLN in up to 600 megawatt of capacity. We bring the experience, obviously, that in other region of larger plants and cost reduction of these technologies. But we see the potential of the country, especially in Indonesia, I would say, in terms of large volumes of even smaller plants. So what we see generally in the region is that application of PV and batteries will, in a combination of smaller plant, will be very important. Wind definitely, but wind will play in certain other regions, maybe less in Indonesia, and mostly for offshore. And then obviously we are very active as well in super efficient combined cycle plants, where as today still obviously we focus on the renewables, but the combined cycle and gas have still the play and will have still a play in the energy transition, at least in the next year. So there is a big potential. The question is obviously to have the volumes enough volumes, enough land, because the issue obviously is the dispersion of the land. And in some cases, as we have seen obviously in Vietnam, is the fact that the regulatory systems need to be updated to what is the international standard and bring the ability for international financing. So that type of experiences has been learned. We have been present and we are present in Vietnam with a small PV plant, 50 megawatt. That was the limitation of this first commitment that we had with the country. The potential of Vietnam is huge as well in terms of energy capacity, but obviously we need to that the country focus on this ability to attract international financing, and for that the regulatory system need to be up to date. So there are a development. There are obviously lessons learned that are brought in the regions. But the good news is there are advancement and will be plant built very competitive, as Eddie mentioned before, in terms of floating solar, in terms of what is our peers did for Indonesia, what we will do for Indonesia in terms of floating solar and battery. So it's starting with this, will accelerate as well the development of future projects.
Thank you, Dr. Andrea. And if I hear it correctly, I mean, your footprint in Indonesia, Philippines, and Vietnam. So the three countries is also in the focus of ETP. So if I can circle back to Sirpa, that so you are bringing donors, philanthropy, and partners to address the issue of energy transition in this region, particularly in these three countries. And then also the question about the financing, because that's what Dr. Andrea mentioned, how to attract the financing. So to Sirpa, that so how do you see this point? Are you also helping to bringing this investment, or also the question that who's going to finance the energy transition in this region? With currently, as you know, we still heavily reliance on all of the fossil fuels issue. Sirka, we can hear from you on that point.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm very happy to hear that there is a concern regarding the underpinnings and the policy context, regulatory framework, that the private sector developers that spoke before me and companies can also relate to and sort of urge the public sector to move forward with. So I just wanted to highlight a few things that we are doing in that regard. Again, capitalizing on the relative strengths of our funders. So first of all, in terms of policies, for instance, just in a case of Indonesia, we are trying to bring the donor community together to provide forward planning, forecasting, modeling advice to the government under one set of assumptions. You wouldn't know, Benny, that currently there is some 5 models developed, all with their separate assumptions, providing data to the government and support and advice to the government. So it is no surprise that also government agencies have number of energy transition policies with number of varying different targets. So one of our efforts is to try to bring some uniformity in that. Another thing we're doing, for instance, in the Philippines, mentioned by Dr. Andrea Lovato earlier here, is to work on a strategic way, with the regulatory framework to bring that to alignment with the energy transition objectives and to really reinforce the regulators' capacity to champion energy transition. And we have a number of other projects as well in the policy front that will help in this domain. In terms of de-risking financing, we just finished our first call for energy efficiency innovation window that provides small grants for innovative proposals that aim to address reduction on the energy intensity of the economies. And these range, of course, from various domains. But basically what we are looking to finance are investment grade audits, are supporting capacity building. I would like to see a certification program for investment grade auditors in the countries in Southeast Asia to support sort of expansion of ESCO markets and energy efficiency investments in a grander scale. In terms of working on the grids and making them smarter in that dynamic environment we are moving into, we are, for instance, financing detailed design for the control center in Jawa, Bali to move to an upgraded version of the current control center equipment and its housing infrastructure in order to integrate variable energy in a much grander way into energy mix. And finally, on the knowledge and awareness building, we are launching an energy transition roundtable program, which is something like a practitioner's executive MBA on how to, so access to best global practices, to templates, to how to calculate carbon pricing in my country, you know, what is the role of regulators, how I can make my renewable energy market mechanism more competitive. So these types of issues will be provided toolkits and tools. But let me just mention a few points about what you're really asking me. I think indeed I agree with you that the funding needs are daunting in the ASEAN region for energy transition, and just in the 3 countries that we are now prioritizing for ETP's operations, the numbers are estimated to top some 600 billion by the end of the decade. So obviously a portion will come from fiscal resources of the governments, including the funds that are currently being used to finance those fossil fuel subsidies that can be redirected gradually to support renewable energy and energy efficiency investments. Official aid, development aid will do its part, but it always will remain a small share of it. And hopefully it does provide that catalytic impact that development finance is expected to through unleashing leveraged from funds through demonstration projects. And then we got the private sector resources that really need to be brought en masse into financing energy transition. But here is the real critical issue. We need to de-risk energy transition investment environment so that these profit-seeking resources can flow into energy investment. And then we got the philanthropic funds, Benny. There's an analytical outfit called ClimateWorks that has analyzed last year that only 1 to 2% of the some 750 billion annual philanthropic funding goes to climate goals. So this is the second lowest destination category that receives philanthropic funding after sports. But I just want to also amplify that it's not only about the money. It's really about the networks and bringing our vision together. And advantages of bringing philanthropy in here is that the philanthropy is really so much more than just funding. Philanthropy money is not lazy money. It's anything but lazy. It's very focused. It's highly result-seeking. It's rewarding of progress. So philanthropy is also respect transparency and fiduciary controls, which are key to ensuring that maximum resources are made for energy transition. And philanthropy money is not also burdened by layers of bureaucracy. So it's really a great source of resources for moving the needle on the funding front. And at ETP, we want to really consolidate the 2 fronts between the private funding with public funding, then blending public government resources, ODA, with philanthropic funding, and use competitive technical assistance instruments to generate these intricate, complex analytical outcomes that Dr. Retno also has mentioned there, to take a straight line aim at the results. So that's the key, that the philanthropies thrive here, that we can really have a very bold look at what we want to achieve. And many mentioned already here the coal phase out, a number of other critical but sensitive topics that we need to address. And another feature of philanthropy and bringing public and private together is the diversity. As we all know, diversity brings higher levels of innovation and creativity. And diversity is really very useful in this context, particularly to check dated assumptions and move decision-making rapidly toward the new. So combining these kinds of diverse forces, ETP, we can align really partners toward the energy transition goals. And by combining funders also in this way, we can take advantage of addressing challenges that for public or private funding alone may not be possible. So when we combine public and private networks at international local levels, we leverage that broad advantage of partnering. I want to give one example because in Vietnam, we are financing a very sensitive undertaking to address coal abatement options. We inclusively connect with all international partners to ensure that their work and perspectives are featured in that undertaking. And we also make sure that we have pathways that create a space for real dialogue with the government parties through strong local level alliances. So the main message that I'm bringing here in terms of that daunting financing is that when we predicate combining public and private financing on inclusion and collaboration, this drives results. So it's more than just capitalizing on blended funds, but it's capitalizing on the diversity and the memberships network. So I look forward to also working with all of you in terms of stronger alliances. Thank you, Benny.
Thank you, Zirma. That's going to be financing is indeed a big issue. In fact, the Secretary General of ASEAN Secretary mentioned about 300 more billion USD is needed on the energy sector. So can I invite Jennifer on that one for a short view on that financing, then where it's coming, and how the financing institutions look on this issue. Jennifer, I can circle you for a short response on that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Benny. And I think it's an interesting discussion here, right? Because on one hand, I have clients telling me that they have raised so much money, but there's lack of quality projects to put their money to. On the other hand, we hear of the panelists saying that actually a lot more money needs to go into different energy transition projects. So I think the key issue here is really risk allocation and risk sharing, which Shilpa touched on. Now, I think there is a need for blended financing to bring the right mix of private and public sector money and philanthropic and also multilateral financing into the project, so that the kind of returns that each party is seeking commercially or socially can be achieved, right, through this resharing. I'm glad to see some really good example of green bonds or sustainability bonds being raised, and financial institution playing very key role in catalyzing these bonds issued. So, for example, HSBC and Temasek on their 150 million debt financing platform to target marginally bankable project. That I think is a really catalytic move. Sembcorp's sustainability linked bond, which ties them to actual results to be accountable for in terms of carbon emission reduction. That's very important as well. So I think these are, and IFC plays a very key role in terms of the Sembcorp sustainability linked bond issuance. So these examples of financial institutions playing a catalytic role in green bonds and sustainability linked bond is what I would like to see more in the region.
Okay. Thank you, Jennifer. That I think we have. It's very interesting. Innovation is somehow operated, underrated words on the energy transition issue, but unfortunately, we don't have much time to discuss it. We have less than 4 minutes. So if I can ask each of panelists, for your last remarks, okay, what is the most important action that the region should take on the we're talking about innovation and energy transition. So if I can ask each of you, but please be short because we have a very short time, that I can start with Mr. Eddie first.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I feel the economic growth of ASEAN has been one of the most dynamic and fastest in the world, but the COVID pandemic has kind of caused these unprecedented shocks to the industries and sectors across the region. The energy sector has not been spared as well, but it would play a pivotal role in the regional recovery effort. So while we are dependent on these incremental technology innovations to help move the efficiency needles on various technology, we also require innovation in the area of trade, investments, human capital, and regulatory harmonization in order to make energy more reliable, sustainable, and affordable for everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's a lighter point. So Dr. Andrea, if I can pass it to you for your thoughts.
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for this discussion. I think very interesting. Yeah, I think from our side, two major points. One is, I mentioned before, is the regulatory systems that has to be in certain regions bring up to the international standard. There are plenty of examples that have demonstrated not only in the Middle East region, but in the south part of Africa. This is North Africa as well. To take regions that have been developing from nearly zero renewable to a lot of capacity of renewables. So that is an example and very easy to be taken and implemented. And the other is obviously the ability to open to the private sector to competition, because the competition is the one that brings good tariff, it brings good solutions. And that is basically with our open, transparent system, allow the private sector really to come to bid, to provide their best, and that will definitely accelerate what is the potential of the region in terms of renewable, and I would say put in perspective also for green energy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sirpa, for your final thought as well.
It's always difficult to put all eggs in one basket, and you've heard me talk about 4 barrier areas, but if you press me, then I probably would say that creating a level playing field among the technologies to enable private sector financing into renewables as well as in energy efficiency is the key. And how to do that is probably would focus on the gradual reduction of the subsidies that are now going into fossil fuels and redirecting those resources to other incentives, and then also pricing greenhouse gases either through carbon pricing or other mechanisms. These are growing a lot of momentum in Europe and elsewhere in East Asia, and we have a lot of studies on how to do that, and these pricing signals are really so extremely critical as they leave the flexibility for the consumer to choose, and therefore open up a playing field for the private sector where the greatest resources for energy transition really are. So Benny, let me just thank you so much for bringing ETP into this discussion. I've really very much enjoyed it and appreciate it. We look forward to more. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, and thank you, Siva. Jennifer, your final thought as well.
Right. Thank you, Benny. I'll be very quick. I think I would like to see more financial institutions and investors holding themselves accountable to the cost of climate change and really making the effort to catalyze and participate in energy transition projects. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. That could be. Thank you, Jennifer. Unfortunately, Dr. Retno dropped the internet connection, but as we come to the end of the session, I think a lot of insight. So I'd like to thank you to all of the experts who joined us today, share your insight on innovation. Definitely it's just a starting point because, as you said, many work need to be done in the future. So on behalf of the team, I'd like to thank you everyone for this kind of discussion. So that's the end of the panel discussion. Then I will pass back to my colleagues, Gabriela Yananto. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Benny, for the excellent moderation. Some key takeaways from the discussion: ASEAN needs to innovate in order to accelerate energy transition, and one of them is by intensifying the innovation in ASEAN power grid. Regional cooperation is urgently needed, in addition to supportive regulatory frameworks to attract foreign investment on high-end technologies such as hydrogen and lower carbon options such as gas and renewables. ASEAN needs to de-risk energy transition investment and surrounding environment to mobilize the financing from private funding as the backbone and public finance as the catalyst through effective blended financing. Thank you to all panelists for the insightful and wonderful discussion. Mr. Eddie Tan, Mrs. Jennifer Tay, Dr. Rutno Gumilang Dewi, Dr. Andrea Lovato, and Mrs. Sirpa Jarvanpa for sharing your knowledge and experience with us through the in-depth panel discussion. I would also like to thank Mr. Jonathan Go and Mr. Valentin Musangwa for opening our roundtable session today with wonderful speeches. We really appreciate the valuable time and effort from all speakers in contributing to the success of this roundtable. Also, thank you to all participants for joining our roundtable session today. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact us at secretariat@aseanenergy.org, or you can reach us through our website, www.aseanenergy.org. You're probably wondering about the presentation delivered by our ACE colleagues earlier. Half of the presentation was based on our newly published policy brief entitled ASEAN Climate Action, a review of nationally determined contribution submissions towards COP26. This policy brief is aimed to review the newly submitted and updated nationally determined contributions of the 10 ASEAN member states ahead of the COP26. You can read and download the policy brief from our website, or you can simply scan the QR code for quick access. We have also released our report on ASEAN Power Updates 2021 last month, where we recorded a new trend in the ASEAN region. Note this, 82% of the new installed capacity in 2020 was from renewables. How great is that? The center of this progress was the soar of solar development in ASEAN, which leads to our other policy brief on Vietnam's solar and wind power success, policy implications for the other ASEAN countries. Based on our report, we believe that strong political support and stable and predictable policies and early preparation of transmission systems are needed for success. Building from the success in Vietnam, now is the time for ASEAN to better prepare for renewable energy uptake and gearing up the climate actions to accelerate energy transition. Today's roundtable session is supported by the ASEAN Climate Change and Energy Project, or as we call it, ACCEPT. One of ACCEPT's activities is the ASEAN Researchers Network on Energy and Climate Change. It is a group of scholars, analysts, and other stakeholders gathered in an interdisciplinary forum for this discussion on social, economic, governance, and technical issues related to energy and climate change. For more details on the project, you could access our website and various social media as shown in your screen. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, now we have reached the end of the roundtable session. Once again, on behalf of ACE and the CEO organizing team, I would like to thank all speakers and participants for the extensive discussion today on innovation to accelerate the energy transition in ASEAN. I hope you all stay safe, stay healthy, and see you on our next event. Bye-bye.